Good evening and welcome. I will now call to order the Planning Commission regular meeting for January 27th, 2020. This time I'll look for roll call.
Commissioner Bigham,
Here.
Commissioner Frazier,
Here.
Commissioner Kabata,
Here.
Commissioner Nabel, here. Commissioner Rasmussen, here. Commissioner Wright,
Here.
Commissioner Zoffi.
Here.
Thank you, Commissioner Rasmussen. At this time, we'll look for approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Wright. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 4 on the agenda is open forum. This is an opportunity to approach the podium and discuss anything that is not already on tonight's agenda. Anyone wishing to open a topic may approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Item number 5, Chair's explanation of the hearing process. The Planning Commission is a volunteer advisory group to the City Council. One of the Commission's functions is to hold public hearings and make recommendations on land use and zoning matters. The purpose of these public hearings is to provide an opportunity for each applicant and citizens to present information, ask questions, and express opinions. Since these proceedings are televised and recorded for the public record, anyone wishing to speak must step up to the podium and give their name and address before addressing the Commission. Staff reports are prepared and provided to the applicant and Planning Commission in advance of the meeting. The first step in the hearing will be for staff to present a summary of the report. The applicant will then have the opportunity to briefly explain the proposal and provide additional information or comments. Anyone wanting to speak in favor or against the proposal will then be heard. Upon completion of the testimony, the hearing will be closed to the public comments. The Planning Commission will then discuss and act on the matter. 2 complete agenda packets are available for viewing on the back table. Please do not remove these items. The City Council will act on agenda items 6.1, Cub Garden Center, and 6.2, Summers Landing, EAW, at their meeting on Wednesday, February 5th, 2020, which starts at 7 p.m. The City Council will act on agenda item 6.3, Leafline Labs expansion, 6.4, water treatment facility, and 6.5, High Point, on February 19th, 2020, which starts at 7 p.m. Moving on. Item 6.1, Cub Garden Center, case ICUP2020-001, with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Excellent. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. The first item before you this evening is an interim use permit application by Cub Foods. It is to allow for their annual sale and storage of plant and landscape materials within a temporary greenhouse. The last approval for this interim conditional use permit was in 2014. It is on a 5-year expiration date. So the 5 years is up, so here they are renewing for 2020. If you don't know, Cub Foods is located just north. Target is down here, Aldi across the street. It is at East Point and Jamaica Avenues. Typically, you've seen in the past the greenhouse and landscape area located down in that southwest corner. Cub has proposed, as a part of this interim use permit for the next 5 years, for their location to be up here in the northwest corner, part of that being closer to the building for easier Wi-Fi access, part of the POS or pay service. Makes it easier to connect that way. The greenhouse would be approximately 21 by 60 in size. And it would also take up about 45 parking spaces. This would be the greenhouse as well as some of the outdoor storage of plants, landscaping materials, things of that nature. It is typically fenced, and I will note that there is a darn good existing natural buffer along Islay Avenue there, so that we'll kind of tuck it in there. As a part of an ICUP, there are conditions. One of those being that there is an annual building permit needing to be secured for the construction of the greenhouse. This requires an annual fee as well. A sign package will also be required as a part of that submittal. We want to be sure that the signs that they're proposing are not freestanding signs or off-premise signs, but they can in fact be adhered to the temporary greenhouse structure. So we want to make sure that they're meeting that as well as the size. And with that, I know it's short and sweet, but if there are any questions, I know the applicant is available as well, but I will leave the recommendation.
All right, thank you. Would the applicant like to add any comment? Good. Nope, all right, thank you.
Chair Kambata,
Yes, Commissioner Knable.
I will need to recuse myself from this since I work for Cub Foods, but not the Cottage Grove location. Just want to give you the heads up.
Thank you for the heads up on that. Good step aside. All right, well, with that, I will open public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak for or against the application? All right, seeing none, I will close public hearing. Questions or comment from the council or commission? Cub's been doing this for a long time. It seems to have worked in the past, and I think that as long as they're keeping in step with what they've done in the past, I don't see any problem with it. All right. With no further comment, I guess I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve?
Okay, I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Bigham. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Zopfi. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Next on the agenda, item 6.2, Summers Landing EAW, case EAW 2020-03, with John Burbank presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The applications we have before you this evening is an EAW update and review. It's put on by Summers Landing Development Companies, and it's in relation to the Summers Landing single-family residential development. And I'll get into that a little bit further here. So the actual application request is from Summers Landing Development Companies, and they've submitted an updated report on the 2014 Environmental Assessment Worksheet, or EAW as they're known, for the Summers Landing single-family residential development subdivision. So this property is located to the west of Hadley Avenue, north of 95th Street. There's been several different phases that have been developed throughout the years, so you probably recall reviewing this in the past. The applicant was kind enough to send the latest phases of the project here, 4, 5, and 6, and they would fit in this empty space here. And the next phase that will be before you, the next planning commission meeting will be, actually this one will not be. Phase 4 of the project is the next developing area. So that will be going directly to city council. So with this project, back in 2014, a different development company got concept plan approval for 383 lots that were shown on that drawing. In relation to that concept plan approval, there was a 2014 EAW, and that's what's being reviewed and updated as a part of this application. In 2016, Summergate companies picked up the project and presented Summers Landing First Edition, which was that first phase of the subdivision as you know it, if you've been out in that area. In 2017, the company requested a small lot concept approval before the Planning Commission City Council, which added 19 additional lots, which were basically narrower lots that allowed for the villa-style product, which is popular on the market these days. So those additional 19 lots were added. In 2018, Summers Landing Third Edition was platted. And in 2019, an additional small lot request after the third edition came in, and with the 23 additional lots based on, again, different product styles. And with those additional 42 units total from the original 383, staff felt that we should at least review that EAW to see if there's any changes that would require an actual environmental impact statement. So with any type of review, there's a responsible governmental unit for in 2014, and in this instance, it's the city of Cottage Grove. The topics that are reviewed through the EAW review process are existing ground cover, land use, zoning, geology, water resources, wastewater, air quality, noise, ecological resources, hazardous materials, transportation, and traffic are kind of the big key ones that you'll find in that study. In summary, the update found that adding the 42 additional lots did not create any negative need that would trigger an additional review through an environmental impact statement. So basically what was told to us in the 2014 EAW holds true with the addition of those additional 23 lots that we'll see with the Summers Landing 4th edition. Again, the first 3 phases of the project did not cause any impacts, so it's basically just continue that development as a single-family residential development that the surrounding roadways and infrastructure were constructed for. With that, we are recommending that the City Council approve the update report and find that a new Environmental Assessment Worksheet is not required for the Summers Landing 4th edition single-family residential subdivision. So that would be the recommendation that would be presented to the City Council, assuming the Planning Commission concurs.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Would the applicant like to approach and add any commentary? All right. Nothing further there. Questions or comments from the commission for staff or the applicant? Okay. With that, we will open public hearing. At this time, anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may approach the podium. State your name and address for the record. Seeing none, close public hearing. Additional questions or comments from the commission? Commissioner Rasmussen?
Just reading over the report, it seems like staff researched this fairly well, and everything seems to make sense to me that the original EAW should still be in effect.
Everything seems to be in step with what was originally proposed. And I think, given that, this application is pretty solid. Additional questions or comments? If not, at this time, I would look for a motion.
Make a motion to adopt the findings and recommend approval of the EAW as recommended in staff report.
Okay, I've got a motion to approve the EAW as recommended in the staff report from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Wright. All those in favor signify by saying, I'm sorry, let's back that up. Any additional comment? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. On to item 6.3, Leafline Labs expansion, case CUP 2020-004, with Emily Schmitz presenting.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I am all set now. The next item before you this evening is an application submitted by Leafline Labs as well as APPRO Development to construct an approximate 129,000 square foot greenhouse as well as about 44 100 square foot building connection for the production and manufacturing of medical marijuana at their existing facility. Now, I want to make note that this will rescind the 2014 resolution and will adopt a brand-new resolution with the amendments to the site plan. The site is located in the city's business park. It is located just north of the new Renewal by Anderson expansion and just south of American Logistics Services and east of Garden World. The existing facility, as I mentioned, they do their grow operations as well as their production happens within the existing facility. With the construction of the new greenhouse, that is where the growing operations will take place, and then the production will take place inside the existing facility. Again, the proposed expansion is for an approximate 129,000 square foot greenhouse. The 4,400 square foot link between the buildings is being proposed as restrooms and potential employee break room. Access will still be off of the existing access points on 97th Street. An access road around the new building will be constructed. It will be a paved surface for fire access. Proof of parking is shown. Well, let me back up. So the parking that is shown is the existing parking. The applicant is not proposing any additional parking as a part of this project. They are indicating that the addition of the 45 employees on a second shift, there will not be an overlap of those additional employees at the site. So they have plenty of parking as is, but I will make note that they do continue to show that proof of parking, so if at any time they do feel like they are running low on parking, they do have plenty of room on their site for those additional parking spaces. There was a landscape plan approved in 2014, so the applicant did at that time install a handful of plantings with their initial construction. As a part of this expansion project, they will install some additional plants as well. And I want to go to this next slide because this gives a better idea. You can see some of these young plantings along that south side there. The applicant has indicated that they will plant some additional plantings to create even better buffer. The stormwater ponding on either side creates an even better buffer on that north side as well. So again, with the construction, there'll be a great natural buffer on either side of the project. The proposed greenhouse is what they call a triple peak greenhouse. It will be a glass material. I do have an example that I can certainly pass around as well. This glass material does meet the zoning code requirement of a class 1 material, so it will be above and beyond the minimum 65% class 1 material. I'll make note that there is a potential for venting or the release of air at the top of the building as well as potentially at the sides. And the growing process requires strict 12 hours of darkness, 12 hours of light. So the applicant has indicated that it will be lit only between the hours of 4:30 a.m. and 10 o'clock p.m., 12 hours anytime within that range. And that leads me to odor mitigation as well as lighting. So when we start talking about lighting, they did provide a photometric study. We do not allow for greater than 1 foot candle at any property line of light spill. They have indicated that it is just over 1 foot candle on that westerly side. So they've indicated they'll probably propose some additional plantings, trees and screening and such to keep that light off of the property line, at least below that 1 foot candle. And then when we talk about odor mitigation, in 2014, a strict plan was put in place at that time to ensure that they were evaluating the odor at the site. This includes bi-weekly testing at the site at 3 different locations. One of those locations is at the stack, which is after the carbon filter in the exhaust system of the existing building. The other is just outside the building in this area, and then again at the property line. Over the last handful of years, since 2014, the city has not received any complaints of odor. So ultimately, the applicant has not at this time had to mitigate any type of odor issue at the site. So these same standards and conditions will hold true through with this expansion. So if anything were to be an issue, they would need to mitigate immediately. But again, they'll continue to test bi-weekly to ensure that those levels are staying low. So with that, I know the applicant, Leafline, as well as APPRO, are here in the audience. So if you have any questions for them, they're certainly happy to do so, as well as staff if there's any questions.
All right. Very much. At this time, if the applicant would like to add any commentary or information to the application, they may approach the podium, state your name and address for the record.
I would, Commissioners, just to the point to say that my name is Jack Menasolski, I'm with APPRO Development.
Yep, I have to have you approach the podium so that it's on record. Thank you.
My name is Jack Menasolski with APPRO Development. With us tonight are Ben Peters, our architect, Bill Parker, the CEO for Leafline, and Emily Kowalski, the VP of Cultivation. So we're prepared to answer any questions you might have or any from the audience, so we'll stand for those.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions or comment from the commission? Commissioner Rasmussen?
I just got one question, I guess, regarding the lighting, and I guess my assumption is that the reason we're having trouble meeting that 1-foot candle is that light coming from the greenhouse itself rather than site light?
Both that and the site lighting, and yeah. Thank you.
We want to hear you, sir.
Both that and the site lighting. And when we did the photometric study, or when we ran that and submitted it to Emily, we did it without consideration for the landscape plantings that were on site. In other words, we did the worst case scenario. So what we talked about with Emily afterwards, when we realized we were at 1.03 or 1.3 at the perimeter, is we might look at placing that landscaping in those couple areas that were difficult. And we have a little flexibility there because the whole building meets the Class 1 obligation relative to exterior materials. So if we could have some flexibility and maybe add some landscaping in those areas, we can easily achieve that less than 1-foot candle.
Have you guys had past experience with having to mitigate the light pollution? And what, in the past, what has worked well? Is it, like a coniferous tree, or have you had to do privacy fencing?
Well, I would add, in addition to that, there is some blackout curtains available and incorporated into the structure as well. So those could be utilized as well to cut down the light escaping during evening hours or morning hours.
Okay. Additional questions or comment? Commissioner Frazier?
Kind of along the same lines as the screening and privacy fencing, is there any concerns, and maybe there are other operations like this around the state or in other states where you can draw from, but are there any concerns with essentially putting on display in this glass greenhouse the plants rather than in the nondescript building it's kind of in right now?
Another reason for the blackout curtains,
Yeah.
to be honest. That and its proximity off the road has been a real advantage.
Okay.
That and significant camera surveillance and 24-hour security on site is definitely a consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Zopfi?
Quick question for staff. Could you go back to the slide showing the rendering for the, yeah. And this just might be a question of scale, but on the northwest, southwest corners there, it looks a little pinched for the emergency turn lane going around the building. Is that the case, or do we actually have enough turning radius there for the proposed pavement?
At this radius?
Yeah.
So the question is that,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I might have
Yep,
misspoke.
so the
That's-
property
that's
line-
the- Okay, so the gray is the pavement and the white is gonna be concrete sidewalk around the building? Okay,
That,
that answers
that
my
out.
question.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Additional questions? All right. At this time, I will open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will close public hearing. Additional questions or comments from the commission? All right, at this time, I'll look for a motion.
I move for the approval of CUP 2020-004, subject to the conditions in the report.
I have a motion to approve the CUP subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report from Commissioner Zopfi. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Frazier. All those in favor signify by saying, I'm sorry, back up again. Additional comment? Seeing none? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. On to item 6.4, water treatment facility, case ICUP 2020-002 with Emily Schmitz presenting.
All right, me one more time. So the next item before you is an interim conditional use permit, an application ultimately submitted by the city. It is for a temporary water treatment facility at wells 7 and 8. So a little background, in 2017, the Department of Health changed the health-based value for PFAS within drinking water. So the city ultimately declared a state of emergency and installed 2 temporary water treatment plants, one at well 10 and one at well 3. An ICUP was issued at that time for construction of these buildings as they are temporary in nature and ultimately do not meet the material standards of the zoning code. So these temporary treatment plants allowed the ability to blend water from these treatment plants with other wells within the community that might have varying levels of PFAS within them, and ultimately allowing the city to keep up with peak demands of water. In this particular case, in 2020, well 9 has fluctuating levels, so we're ultimately taking precautionary measures to install this temporary treatment plant, again, to continue to meet peak demands of well use. Again, I want to make note that the levels are not exceeding the health-based values, but again, it's precautionary measures. This particular temporary building will be located at an open space just south of Foothill Road. To orientate you a little bit, Jamaica Avenue and, Hillside Trail. It is just north of Zion Lutheran Church. It is an open space maintained by the city. To give an idea of what the site would look like once the structure is completed within the neighborhood, a neighborhood meeting was held in December, just to give neighbors an idea of what was happening and why. The largest concern from the neighbors was, of course, the removal of any trees within the space, and it has been indicated to them that trees will be and actually have been removed. But of course, we want to maintain that natural buffer between those neighbors. So as a part of the project, an additional 14 trees will be replaced within the site to, again, maintain that natural buffer. I'd also like to make note that some of the trees that were removed, our forester has indicated were diseased, dead, or dying. So it almost was beneficial to the site to kind of clean that area up a bit. To give an idea of construction activities, I'll make note this was the construction of the 2 temporary sites in 2017. Grading, the forming foundation, and then the slab is poured. The intent is for these activities to begin beginning of February, ultimately as soon as possible. The next part of the construction activity will be the installation of the carbon filters. I believe 8 is the number that will be installed, as well as all of the interior plumbing, and then the walls of the structure will be constructed around those carbon filters. Again, as I mentioned, the ICUP, this building is temporary in nature, and ultimately the plans of the city is to remove it at such time it is not needed. I will indicate we've requested 5 years for the ICUP in hopes that within 5 years we'll have a permanent solution for the treatment of the water. If at that time we do need an extended period of time for these temporary treatment plants, we will have to apply for an ICP at that time to extend. With that being said, I will leave the recommendation before you, but I am here as well as our engineering staff if there are more detailed questions around the application.
Thank you very much. Questions or comment from the commission? Commissioner Rasmussen?
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about these temporary filters, but for quite some time, but it seems like there's never any forward momentum on a permanent solution. And I know it's not everybody here at the city. There's a lot of people working on it, but let's say this needs to go on for another 5 years after that, or the permanent solution is just this, replace the carbon filters. Are these buildings, are they able to be upgraded to a point where they do meet the city standards? And I guess I don't want these to stick around for another 10 or 15 years and the city kind of dodge out of, meeting the development standards that everybody else has to comply with.
Yes, Commissioner Rasmussen, that's a very good question. So for the last year and a half, City Administrator Jennifer Levitt, myself, have been participating in the 3M settlement agreement working groups. It's gone on longer than the state initially indicated. They were going to have a plan in place by December. There was a few months delay. They had some issues with a lot of the modeling and some other legitimate reasons for delaying. Right now, we're sitting at like March, April, where they're going to have their recommended solutions for each metro community. So we're getting very close. They'll have one-on-one meetings with cities as they talk about that. Staff and the council have been very adamant, we want to stay on city water. They're also looking at some regional options, a surface water plant in the Mississippi, things like that, but those are pretty major changes. So that's our confident route. Part of the reason we're very confident these would be temporary, we actually have a location cited for a centralized treatment facility in this area. It's much more efficient and on like a construction scale, it's just a much more efficient facility. Also, this funding uses the 3M consent decree, which is kind of an ongoing funding for temporary measures, and that's how it's funded. So if the state tried to make it permanent, they'd have to pay 3M back. So there'd be no intention of doing that. So very confident that if we do move the route of groundwater treatment, we do have a location cited for a centralized facility, kind of close and behind the central fire station. So, but it has been a long process. Once we get that answer, we're hoping if we move the route we want, it's probably a couple years of design, begin construction, and get something in place. So,
Thank you. So you're saying there's other decision makers involved?
yeah, it's the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources. They're the trustees of that grant money. It's $850 million that was received from 3M. So they are the ultimate decision makers, but they have been adamant that they will not force a solution on a city that we do not want, and they're going to work closely with us on that. So,
Thank you. Additional question?
So the intent, once the permanent solution is settled upon, these buildings will be removed, everything demoed out of there, put back to its original state.
that is correct. So that question came up of, what if the city decides to keep them? Well, if we decide to keep them, then we would have to pay 3M back for the cost, the millions of dollars to build them. So definitely not something we would do. Also, those tanks are rental tanks, and the only way to get them out is to take that building down. So definitely, confident. But it's a good question because we don't want to, like you said, skirt a measure and not follow what other people do. So.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments?
A question.
Commissioner Bigham?
This is an established neighborhood. Is this the road going in there? Is that just a gravel road going into the?
That's correct. It's a gravel road right now, but because we're going to have more continuous maintenance, it will be paved actually when we're finished with construction. So.
Okay. And construction is done during the weekdays, daytime?
Yeah, it'll be weekdays and Saturdays. During the initial construction, it was much more of an emergency state. We were working 7 days a week and long hours, but this will follow more of a typical construction hours.
Okay, thank you.
Was
Commissioner
there-
Wright?
I'm sorry. We like you up there. Was there any concerns by the neighbors of like traffic there, like construction traffic, especially it being like kind of a dirt road, like kicking up any dust or anything like that?
Not specifically stated, but it is something we keep an eye on. If we have to put chloride down, we would do that to help with dust control until we get the pavement in place. That's certainly something that we'd want to take care of with the proximity to the homes.
All right,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other
Additional
questions?
comment? All right, at this time, we will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application may approach the podium. State your name and address for the record. Seeing none, I will close public hearing. Additional comment? This time, I'll look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the interim conditional use permit, subject to the recommendations in the staff report.
I have a motion to approve the interim conditional use permit, subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Bigham. Additional comment? At this time, I'll ask that all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. On to item 6.5, High Point. Zoning Amendment 2019-063 and Preliminary Plat 2019-064 with John Burbank presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. What I'll be presenting my second time this evening are actually two application requests. One is for a zoning amendment, and the second is for a preliminary plat for the High Point multifamily residential development proposed by D.R. Horton. Applicants from the, representatives from the applicant are here this evening if you have questions after I'm done presenting. Before I go any further, I do want to point out that the public hearing notice that was sent out included a graphic that had a version of the plat that wasn't a final version. It had two access points onto Geneva Avenue, or Century Avenue if you're looking at it from Newport's perspective. And the road did not continue all the way through. There was no connections onto 66th Street. So what you have before you here is the actual plat that you'll find in your packet and covered in detail in the staff report. So I just wanted to clarify that there are no connections to Geneva Avenue. They are onto 66th Street South. So the first request, again, is a zoning amendment to change the zoning of 14.4 acres of vacant land located at the southeast corner of 65th Street and Geneva Avenue from AG2 agricultural to R5 medium density residential. And number two, a preliminary plat for 82 individuals, 0 lot line residential lots, 1 common lot around the HOA portion of the development, 3 outlots for creation of a multifamily townhome development. If you recall, the application or the project is located south of 65th Street, to the west of Oatman Middle School, and to the east of, again, Geneva Avenue or Century Avenue, depending on the community's perspective. There are existing wetlands on the property. The watershed district did agree with the delineation of those wetlands. There is an existing homestead and accessory structure on the building that would be removed as a part of the construction process. And then there are existing trees in the site that would be removed through the grading process and mitigated, and we'll get into that in a little bit. The current address of the site is 6193 65th Street South. So what we have before us is a current rendering of the project showing landscaping, the wetlands, and then the new ponds that are created as a part of the project. The existing land use, the adopted land use for the 2040 comprehensive plan is medium density residential. The existing zoning again is AG2 and would be going to the R5 medium density. If you recall, we reviewed this site back in 2019 as a concept plan. With that, there were 4 7-unit cluster configurations of buildings, 98 residential units, and those buildings total 18 in number. The current building unit configuration is 82 residential units, 17 buildings, and they range from 3 units, 4, 5, and 6 units, depending on where they're located in the subdivision. And this graphic identifies those different building sizes. The medium density performance standards refer back to the R4 zoning district. And so what you see here identified, per the zoning ordinance, the narrowest portion of a lot abutting a public right-of-way is the front of the project, and that would be this location here. And so the front yard is 66th Street, which would have a 30-foot front yard setback, a 35-foot rear yard setback along 65th Street, and then 20-foot side yard setbacks for the corner lots located on Goodview and Geneva Avenues. One thing I should point out here, you'll note that they do have the off-street parking as was shown on the concept plan. They're providing 18 and 12 is the required number of off-site parking spaces above and beyond the driveways. So with the surface water management plan, there were some tweaks that needed to be, that were identified by the engineering comments, and those would be taken care of with the final plat and the final construction drawings. But again, there was 2 wetlands, existing wetlands on the property. They are providing the required minimum buffers, both in average and in width on that property, and that's the little colored areas around the ponds and wetlands. And then they are putting 2 additional ponds, Outlot C and Outlot D, and those would be for rate control and infiltration. These wetland delineation areas or buffer areas are required to be signed, and we're working with the applicant to get the appropriate signage for that when the project does come in. Again, here's that rendering that we looked at before, but what that shows is the landscaping that they are proposing. If you look at your plan set that's included in the packet, there is a black and white drawing of that, but it's just not quite as detailed as the colored up version. For the trees that are not being replanted on the site, there is a $131,850 tree mitigation fee that is being required as a part of the removal of the trees on the site. As a part of the park dedication requirements, the Technical Review Committee recommended that cash dedication be required for this project, given the location of the school, the park to the south, and other trails and parks in the immediate vicinity. The trails and sidewalks that are included with the project would be sidewalks along the east and west local roads, a transportation trail along 65th Street, including the area outside of the project in this location here, which would require a temporary easement. There is an existing transportation trail that was put in with the 65th Street roundabout project and other improvements that were put in. In terms of architecture, there'd be a varied color palette on these particular units that are being shown. This is the 4-unit building, and then the brick and stone would also be required, and there's a certain percentage that will be included in the final plat packet. One of the things that was requested during the last concept plan review was cross-sections of that showing the new project in relation to the existing residential developments. So what you're seeing here are the 5-unit townhome identified, existing accessory structure across the street. Right when you drive into the subdivision or down on Geneva Avenue, it's very evident where that building is. You can kind of get a perspective looking at that building, what will be going on next door. So I find this very helpful. In terms of transportation, one of the things that with the reduction of units, it also reduced that number of trips per day. The single family units did not change. Oh, in comparison, if you were to have single-family units on that site, it'd be 520 trips per day based on the average density of a typical single-family subdivision. What's identified on the map here are existing traffic counts and the 2040 traffic counts in red. And what you'll see there is that there's quite a gap available for additional traffic in those areas. Again, those roadways were designed and constructed for residential development in these areas. So it's not like it's just a development being plopped in the middle of a field with no traffic that can accommodate that. Again, with those improvements that occurred around the roundabout and turn lanes and traffic lanes, one of the things that took care of are some of those things that would be needed with a newer development, and given the previous state of those roadways, they were gravel roads and things like that. One of the things that's talked about with the development to the north, you'll be seeing coming up, is the potential to vacate the right-of-way north of Geneva Avenue, and that would wind its way back to the roundabout to help alleviate some of the traffic concerns that were voiced at that 65th and Geneva intersection. One of the other things that should be noted is that ice was reported as a problem along this area here. And what it turns out is that the septic system for 10E packaging in that northeast corner of, or northwest corner of Geneva Avenue had a failing septic system, and they've since closed off that septic system and are pumping about 2,000 gallons a month. They're under a temporary permit with the county, and we are working with them to provide them service through this subdivision. The city of Newport would be required to process a comprehensive plan amendment. And so things are moving forward there. And the public works crews for the city of Newport said that they would be monitoring this area for icing and things like that during the winter. Through the planning process, we also coordinated with Washington County into relation to the additional right-of-way that's required along 65th Street and then along Geneva Avenue. That was just a prescriptive easement in that area, and we'd be formalizing that through the planning process. There was a little portion of that that was included and acquired with the Oltman Middle School plat. Again, the access points are along 66th Street, and those would service all 82 of the units. The recommendation is that the Planning Commission to consider the zoning amendment to change the zoning of 14.4 acres of vacant land located at the southeast corner of 65th Street and Geneva Avenue from AG2 agricultural to R5 medium density residential, and number 2, a preliminary plat for 82 individual zero lot line residential lots, 1 common HOA lot, and 3 outlots for the creation of a multifamily townhome development. Again, the applicants are here to answer any questions, and I would be willing to stand further for any additional questions.
Thank you, sir. If the applicant would like to add any additional information or comment, please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Deb Ridgway with D.R. Horton. We're at 20860 Kenbridge Court, and that's in Lakeville, Minnesota. I'm just here to answer any questions. We've worked closely with staff to get to the plan that you see today, and we're pretty proud of it. So here for any questions.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Questions or comment from the commission? At this time, I will open the public hearing. As a reminder, if you wish to speak as part of the public hearing process, you'll have 2 to 3 minutes to speak. All questions asked during the public hearing are being written down by staff, and then after testimony is given, staff will respond to all questions at once. If there's anyone wanting to speak in favor or against the proposal, please come forward and state your name and address. At this time, we will open public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the application, please approach the podium. State your name and address for the record.
My name is John Coyman. I live at 6749 Geneva Avenue in Cottage Grove. It's to the south of this property. Chair and members of the commission, thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak to you tonight. I think the one question I had about the transportation, I think part of that was in this, but, so there has been a transportation impact analysis study, and if I wanted a copy of that, I could probably get it.
That's my understanding, and staff, again, will be following up with your questions after.
All right, sounds good. Page 11, under open space, it seems to indicate that the requirement is resolved by using dog park area. So my calculation sets us at about a 3/4 of an acre. And I couldn't spot any, good dimensions on the drawings. Can somebody give me the dimensions of the open space dog area? And then I guess with that is, I couldn't really spot how you would ever get from the development into this dog area. Are you just crossing through the pond or through these people's yard, or is the access on Geneva Avenue? Page 12 seems to indicate that the stormwater drainage for the property will go through the south, and then that'll end up in the pond that's on the, I guess it's a city park that was donated by District 833. Is that where the drainage will go? And then with that, if that's the case, can you give me the pre-Oatman School discharge rates, the current with Oatman School discharge rates, and then your calculations for the discharge rates for the new property? My concern is that eventually the water out of that pond goes through our property, and I'm just want to make sure it's not going to get any worse than it already is.
Again, staff will probably follow up, but if you remember from the presentation, there's a couple of infiltration ponds and rainwater retention ponds. So with these developments, the objective is always to try and keep the infiltration rates similar to what they were as raw land. So they also have to have a contingency for overflow. But again, I think staff will be able to address that for you.
All right, sounds good. And then just with I saw all the data on the trees and the forestry information. So just from my understanding that, right now there's thousands of mature trees. Basically, after day one, there won't be a single one left at the end of this, right?
So the development is required to, and again, the applicant can probably speak better to this, but the development, as part of the development, they're gonna be replanting trees. And then there's the park dedication fund, that for any deficit, they have to pay into that fund to offset the cost and to offset the tree count. And then those trees can either be, that fund can be applied towards park, or we make sure the trees as many of the trees get back into the development as they have to take out for development. And again, I think staff will probably be able to answer that question a little bit more clearly than I can.
All right, sounds good. But basically, we're going from 80, 90, 100-foot trees.
Well, whenever you're going from a raw land density to a developed density, there's gonna be less trees than there currently are.
All right. Very good. And then, I guess, with the wetlands and stuff, there was no EAW worksheet required on these?
Again, I think staff would have to answer that.
Sounds good. And then, I'm not real fond of this whole idea, and I guess, one of the big questions you ask on the rezoning is the zone change consistent with the surrounding area? So if you go up there, it's very rural residential. My lot and my neighbor's lots are designated with a different color on the planning map. It's a designation for single-family homes on larger acreage, stuff like that. So, if you come down our street, I did a little math, and the folks in St. Paul Park, we're at 0.74 houses per acre. The Newport folks are at 0.29 houses per acre. Cottage Grove residents are at 0.20 houses per acre. This new development is 7.64 houses per acre. So, to me, it doesn't seem consistent. I realize it's got to get developed. It seems like this zoning is, I can't say spot zoning, but it's very close to that. If you look at the map, again, it sticks out like a sore thumb as far as that goes. I think that's all I had. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. If anyone else would like to approach or speak for or against the application, they may approach the podium and state their name and address for the record. All right, at this time, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing. I'll need a motion.
Motion to close the public hearing.
I have a motion to close the public hearing from Commissioner Knable. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Wright. Public hearing on this matter will be closed. Additional comment from the commission? To address some of the, traffic and, rainwater retention questions that John had, I think versus when this came through back in 2019 as just a proposal where it is now, as a concept plan. I think the city and the applicant have taken some concessions with regard to traffic flow and that rainwater retention. But I'd still like to see if staff could maybe answer that question regarding the EAW.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, thanks for having us. So in regard to the full traffic study that was questioned and the EAW, neither were actually triggered because of the number of units was not high enough to trigger either of those. As far as the stormwater, the wetland on this northwest side actually drains to the north, but then the rest of the site does drain towards the south, and we can provide all the discharge rate information that has been requested. There was a wetland delineation completed, as was previously mentioned, and that has been approved. I think that answers those questions.
All right, thank you. Additional questions or comment? Commissioner Frazier?
I guess just the one question, this might be better for the applicant, as I know the speaker asked about the dog park, and it doesn't look like on the drawings that we've gotten, especially one that's up on the screen right now, it doesn't look like there is an access. I'm assuming it just didn't make it on there, but if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yep. So the dog park, I don't know how to clear these red things off of here right now. Am I doing this right? This way? So the dog park is in that area right there. It will be a private dog park just for the residents of the community, and access would be through this area right here. We'd have some sort of path. It hasn't been completely figured out yet, but that's where access would be.
Okay, thank you.
And the acreage of that park is about 1/3 of an acre. I think there was a question about trees as well.
Yeah, regarding the number of trees being removed and.
Yep,
versus
not all the
number being
trees will
going
be
back
removed.
on.
There will be some areas where we're saving trees, specifically in that dog park area. They're kind of taller pine trees, so we're keeping those. And then there's areas around the wetland as well that will be saved.
And then along Geneva Avenue, is there any special consideration for those trees? If there are any mature trees there as part of a screening plan?
Because there's a sidewalk that's going through there now, the trees need to be removed.
Okay,
So most of those will be removed, if not all of them.
okay. And then as part of the landscape plan, when you do your final landscaping, trees will be added back in?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Questions or comments from the commission? Thank you.
Thanks.
At this time, I would look for a motion.
There was one question on the land use and zoning.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, the requested zoning, the R5 medium density zoning classification is consistent with the medium-density land use designation in the adopted 2040 comprehensive plan. So as that makes its way through the Metropolitan Council, basically the land use and the zonings will catch up and be in alignment as required per state statute. So as this makes its way through the city process, we're hoping that that comp plan gets adopted sooner than later, and we're working with the applicant on the staging and timing related to the development in relation to that.
And as the comp plans progress, they're due how often? Every 10 years, correct?
They're updated every 10 years, but this is part of the 2040 comprehensive plan, which is on the table right now.
So looking back at, say, somebody who's lived here for 50 years and has a similar concern where what they had initially is not consistent with, or that comp plan gets updated every 10 years as, the community's needs or housing needs or, transportation and access needs change. Is that the purpose for that for that comprehensive plan? Is that
Correct.
part of the reason for the process, or could we maybe just kind of deliberate a little bit on what the comp plan does as far as helping guide the city in its development?
Communities are required to update their comprehensive plans every 10 years per state statute. With that, you are correct. The visions and things change as we get different elected officials, as we get different commissions, as we get different steering committees. So each comprehensive plan has something to it that adds to a neighborhood, changes a neighborhood, and builds a community. The one thing I pointed out in the staff report is that one of the early planning documents that was completed for this area, the West Drop Task Force report, out of that report came the tree preservation ordinance, as well as the policies related to interconnected parks via trail networks and things you find in the community these days. And that actually got kicked over to the East Ravine planning process and the 2030 comprehensive plan. So yeah, as these different small area studies are completed, as comprehensive plans change, the land use change and reflect those
So
plans.
as the community continues to evolve,
That's correct.
the land use needs change as well.
That's correct.
Thank you. Did staff have any other items to address before I call for a motion? Okay, at this time, I'll look for a motion.
I'd motion to approve zoning amendment 2019-063 and PP 2019-064.
Subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report, or will there be any other stipulations?
No other stipulations here. This
Okay.
was in the staff report.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Rasmussen, subject to the conditions stipulated in the staff report for zoning amendment 2019-063 and preliminary plat 2019-064. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Zopfi. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. On to item 8.1, recap of January city council meetings. Oh, I'm sorry. 7. Sorry. That one always sneaks past me. It's there on the bottom. Item number 7, approval of planning commission minutes for December 16th, 2019. At this time, I'll look for, if there are no amendments or changes, I'll look for a motion.
So move.
I have a motion to approve from Commissioner Frazier. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Wright. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Now on to item 8.1, recap of January city council meetings. I'll turn this over to Director Costello.
Chair Kambata and fellow planning commissioners, thank you. To begin with, I wanted to introduce somebody next to me. This is Ben Boyk. He is our new Community Development Director. Ben comes from West St. Paul, 12 years as the Assistant Community Development Director. So You will see Ben now at the Planning Commission, and I will step back from this role and go back to economic development, so helping businesses in the community. So I might see you every once in a while, so we welcome Ben aboard.
Thank you very much.
To begin, there was one meeting in January for City Council. Items on that, I put at everybody's chair a presentation by the St. Paul Association of Area Realtors. They kind of gave us an update on the housing market here in Cottage Grove. And if that's something in the future that planning commissioners would like, we can provide that presentation for you here at a planning commission meeting. In terms of agenda items, the November meeting minutes were approved, as well as the Woodward Ponds had a zoning amendment and preliminary plat, so that's north of Military Road and a quarter mile west of Keats for 164 units of multifamily, so that's tri and townhome type development. That was approved on council's regular agenda. And then there was a workshop on the Pasavad property, which is the property to the north of what you heard tonight of the High Point development. So they wanted to present in front of council at a workshop to see if council liked the idea. They're proposing single family with a villa product as well. So that's a smaller footprint in terms of a width of a residential lot. In terms of other meetings that took place in January, strategic planning. So we had 3 strategic planning meetings. The first was January 4th on a Saturday. City Council and directors met to discuss the strategic planning. We've had one. It was time to update that. So we met, we came up with 3 priorities and 2 strategic directions for each of those. Then we met again on January 22nd with council, directors, and selected staff to develop those initiatives as well as action steps for that. And then staff is tasked with going back and kind of filling in those action steps, and then we'll bring that forward to City Council for final approval, hopefully in March sometime. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Dennis for additional.
All right, well, for the last time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Couple things tonight for us. Good evening, everyone. Ben now is on board with us, and I do want to thank everyone for going easy on him tonight. We're gonna turn up the heat come next meeting, so.
Fair.
Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you.
Couple things I'll mention. This past Saturday, I've got in my hands a copy of the Cottage Grove Legislative Agenda. We had a chance to go to the Capitol. In fact, Commission Member Wright joined us in that group. And this was a day to go in and to get in front of our legislators and to be able to share some concerns and some valid viewpoints for the direction we want to see the city go in. We also received a really nice tour of the Capitol, and it's just an incredible building. So if you have not had a chance to get down there at some point, we definitely recommend that you do. And who knows, maybe next year if we go back again, you guys could, some of you could join us on that trip. So it was a lot of fun and a good time to be there and spread the messaging of our community. I also want to mention that February 5th, which is going to be our next council meeting, that before that meeting, starting at 6:30 p.m., Mayor Bailey will provide the State of the City address to Cottage Grove. So that's something to bring everybody up to current speed on the developments happening in the city and things we've got planned. They'll be talking about all kinds of different accomplishments that we've had over the past year and things planned for our future. And then I just want to, in closing, I want to thank Commissioner Costello for her contributions here to our panel. For a period of time, she wore a couple different hats. And as we tend to do at different times, we've got a lot of great staff people that pitch in to help do different things. And so definitely enjoyed having you be part of this with us. And again, anytime that you come back in here, we know it'll be something good because it'll be an opportunity here for our community. So that's what I have for you. Is there any questions you might have for me?
Questions for Councilman? No? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, and thank you all.
On to the next item, 8.2, response to Planning Commission inquiries. Do we have any responses to go over? Nope. And then item 8.3, Planning Commission requests. Any requests from the commissioners here regarding any of the topics of tonight's meeting?
No.
No? All right. At this time, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Wright. Have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Bigham. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.